Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, as the Toronto Argonauts down the Montreal Alouettes 37-18, handing the Birds of Montreal their first loss of the season. It was a huge win. JB and I will break it all down for you, and all of that is going to be coming up in the next few minutes. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing, our title sponsor, because this is a great time for a celebratory Longboat Pale Ale. You've got to have one. You've got to try it out. If you haven't tried Longboat Pale Ale yet, it is the beer that is made for fans of the Double Blue. That's you. Go and get a Longboat Pale Ale at Something in the Water Brewing. You can find them in Liberty Village, just steps from Lamport Stadium, steps from BMO Field. Anytime you're watching a practice, anytime you're watching a game, it's a perfect time to go to Something in the Water Brewing. JB, let's talk about this one. This was a massive win for the Argos, 37-18. We both called a Toronto win here, but I don't think either of us saw it being a double-digit win and almost 20-point win. What did you take away from this game?
Well, I think it shows when Toronto gets points from all three phases that they are very, very hard to beat. They played a much more disciplined, much smarter game today than they did in Toronto. They were able to get pressure even in that first quarter, so they definitely dialed up. They definitely dialed up some pressure packages that were more successful. They were, obviously Janarion Grant was unstoppable for them, and they were able to get defensive touchdowns. So I think it's an incredible team win, but I'm not shocked by it. I think this is exactly how good this team is when they don't turn the ball over 5 times.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like they should have won last week in Saskatchewan, but they lost the turnover battle 5-0, and they were still in the game at the end. They had a chance at the end and couldn't get it done. But that's it. They just have to stay out of their own way. Interestingly enough, Coach Dinwiddie was he wasn't happy with the win per se. Like, he's happy that they won the game, but he was really upset with the offense, with the receiving core. He was not upset with Dukes, but he felt like Dukes should have taken a few shots downfield, that there were opportunities that he maybe shied away from, but receivers lining up offside and mental mistakes. It's funny because it wasn't really the way I saw this game, because I viewed this as, why don't you just play safe offensively? Like, I didn't really want Dukes to take shots downfield because I didn't think they needed it, especially once they started getting points from the other phases, from McManus and that pick six and Janarion Grant and that kickoff return touchdown. I actually liked that Dukes didn't go deep downfield, but maybe that's something that, Coach Dinwiddie knows that that's an area of his game he's going to have to put on film, and he's going to have to use to beat other teams. You're not going to be able to just throw it 5 yards at a time and beat teams on any given week, because it's not every week you're going to score in all 3 phases.
But it was not. Dukes did not turn the ball over, and obviously he would be gun shy to throw the ball downfield. It's not what he's particularly good at. So I think that he played fine. There was a couple of rough. It wasn't a perfect game. A couple of rough spots. A fumble, a couple of high snaps. A couple of offensive penalties for sure. But those are within like the margin of acceptable mistakes. When we talk about playing smarter, I'm not talking about playing a perfect game. I think you want to play within the margin of acceptable mistakes, and that's the way they played tonight. And obviously Fajardo going down had a huge impact on the game, and tilted the balance towards Toronto. But even in that first quarter, I thought that they had a good take on what they wanted to do with Fajardo, and had done a good job of not letting Montreal jump out to a huge lead.
I felt like I was actually, obviously you don't want to see Cody Fajardo get hurt. You don't want to see any player get hurt. I felt like when Fajardo went down and Evans came in, I was actually worried about that part from an Argos standpoint, because I felt like their game plan for Fajardo was so good. He played the entire first quarter and scored 1 point. throughout that whole first quarter. He took every snap from Montreal in that first quarter, and they had nothing. The game plan for him was excellent. They came up tight on those receivers, and he didn't know where to go. He was getting hit in the pocket. He was sacked a couple times. One was called back because Priester ended up getting a lot of his face mask twice, I think, on that sack.
Yeah, there was like a triple face mask penalty.
Yeah, you could have thrown every flag. But he was under pressure, and he had to escape. And the injury was another play where he ends up, rolling out and having to try and make something happen with his legs. He's got two receivers that are covered. There's nowhere to throw the ball. He gets shoved right as he releases the ball. It looked like he hurt his hamstring trying to brace from the shove. And when Evans came in, that's so tough for a defense. And you, as a defensive coordinator, this, having planned for one guy when there's another guy there with a very different skill set, that makes it very tough. Fajardo does nothing but throw short. And then when you zero blitz him, he'll throw long. Evans is very different. He will take shots downfield, and he will, he moves about in a different way, but he will take some shots downfield. And I felt like they were a little off balance for a while with Evans. Evans scored 14 points in that second quarter. He had one really nice touchdown pass where he was hit by Fraser Sopik, who wasn't touched on a blitz. And as he was being hit, he threw this perfect ball to Rambo for a touchdown. And I just think Toronto wasn't ready for that. They regrouped in the second half. And much like Montreal did to Calgary last week, Toronto held Montreal to 3 points in the second half. That's the adjustment that they had to make to seeing a different guy in there with different skill set. But yeah, I wondered if that might actually cost them, as silly as that sounds, because Fajardo is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I just think, when you've got a game plan for one guy, another guy comes in. Sometimes that's, we still remember Dane Evans from the East Final in 2021 and what bringing a new guy in can sometimes do.
Yeah, I was a little concerned, but I think once they readjusted and were able to bring in a run heavy defense, and really kind of keep an eye on Evans, and force him to beat him with the arms, instead of, they dialed back the blitzes. I think they really caught Montreal by surprise with how much pressure they were able to get. Montreal had come into the game not giving up very much pressure at all. And I think certainly I was surprised. So I can't imagine that Montreal was not surprised at the pressure packages that Toronto came out with in that first quarter.
Yeah, they were all over Fajardo in that first quarter. He looked surprised by it as well, that the protection wasn't holding up. And I didn't expect that because it's the first,
especially being down so many.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Without Flo Remolade and Jake Serezna, it's the first full game that both of those guys, they're both all-stars, and they're both missing from this game. But it just shows you how everyone else stepped up. I think they realized the magnitude of this game. This is massive. The point swing you're talking about, they are now within 4 points of Montreal, and they've got a game in hand as well. Montreal going into a bye week this week. If they'd lost this game, they would have been 8 points down, and they would have lost the tiebreaker. And so that would have put them in a real bind going forward. So I think that, the team realized, and that D-line's like, we're without Jake, we're without Flo, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And I thought there was some clever blitzing. The only blitz I didn't like was Amani Dennis got sent early on a blitz. We see Mason Pierce do this so many times, and he was in for Pierce today. Pierce is great at timing that blitz. Dennis was so late and took a poor angle, and that was the last time I saw him blitz. Instead, they went to the other side, and it was Deshaun Amos. Because Dennis, I think, is great in coverage. He uses his speed well. I'm not sure he's the guy for those late halfback blitzes, and they realized that after the first one. Like, let's flip this and send Amos, and he was able to create some pressure. He got in there, but they didn't have to send heavy blitzes to create pressure, and that's the difference. If you can get pressure without having to zero, then you're in a pretty good spot defensively.
Yeah, I mean really the only bust the whole game was that one middle run where they got caught. So it was a terrific showing by the defense. I mean, Toronto really needed it, because they did not, they put up 130 yards passing. This was not Montreal coming in or Toronto coming in and blowing the doors off Montreal. This was a team effort, but the defense really came up big, I thought, for the offense to really kind of bring Montreal back to earth.
Yeah, they did just that. And that play that you talk about, that's the Walter Fletcher 50-yard run. If you take that away, Walter Fletcher has 4 carries for 10 yards. They just could not run, and it was without run blitzing. I think that's one of the things you talked about as a key to the game in OCDC was stop, letting Montreal run. And what you don't mean like just, anytime the back gets the ball, just let them go. But what you mean is you're not scheming to stop the run. And if you're going to never run blitz and they beat you by running the ball, well, then so be it. And that's the thing. This D line is so good. Brinkman in the middle is so good at being able to just chew up bodies and take up space to allow the linebackers in there to stop that run. You take out that 150-yard run, everything else was shut down. There was nothing at all there. And on that play, they had it positionally. Metier was coming in, but he came in a little bit late and he took a bad angle, which you don't typically see him do. He's usually really good with that stuff. He was in the box as a safety, and he just took a bad angle, and there was no one left in the middle of the field. Fletcher just took off straight, and Johnson, he turned Johnson inside out.
Can we talk about the outrageous pick play on Montreal's touchdown?
Yeah, well, sure. Go ahead. You felt that was offensive pass interference, did you?
Well, I liked how the guy ran up the field, then circled back and picked up his guy like his punt return.
Yeah.
You can't peel back and pick up a defender, not traditionally.
Yeah, not just like punt return, but like 1990s punt return. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one thing to stand in the way, but he peeled back to pick up the DB. I might have challenged on that, but other than that, I thought Montreal's challenge was a terrible call, and I was ready to explode like the inside out red fire guy if that had been called pass interference.
Yeah, there was no pass interference on that. That was a good no call. That touchdown for Montreal, the reason that surprised me, that the one you're talking about, is it was first and goal from the 1. Second and goal. Sorry, second and goal from the 1. Yeah, but second and goal from the 1. Why, with Caleb Evans in the game, why is Montreal passing in that scenario? And I think that shows you how much they fear that Toronto run defense, because you've got Caleb Evans in the game. You're Montreal. You're on the 1-yard line. That team's automatic on quarterback sneaks from the 1, and they go to the air because I think there was some concern there. And yeah, they get the touchdown. Is a weird play, maybe some questionable blocking. I don't know. I didn't really mind that too much, but as an offensive guy, I thought it was okay.
So you thought that was fine. I'll just peel on back here and pick up my block.
I thought it was all right. It was fine. And again, it's a 1-yard, 1-yard touchdown against 0. So yeah, it's what it's going to be. Let's talk a little bit about the running game for Toronto, because that just put the game to sleep. And in the second half, it just put it away. Like everything was going well for the Argos. They had a lead. Calgary tried to do that to Montreal last week, and it didn't work. Calgary had a 2-touchdown lead about halfway through the third quarter last week, and they tried to turn to the run game to shut things down. And when Toronto started doing that, is about 5 minutes, I think it was 5:26 left in the third quarter, Toronto had that 2-touchdown lead, and they did the same thing, but it worked for Toronto because this run game for the Argos is really strong. They got great blocking up front from the offensive line, especially from the 2 guards. I thought they were exceptional tonight in their run blocking. And so Kadeem Carey ends up with 94 yards rushing. Dukes had 46. Adebaboye 29, McMahon 14, and had the rushing touchdown. They were able to run at will. At one point, they ran 6 running plays in a row, which you just don't see in the CFL. And they just did whatever they wanted to on the ground against Montreal. That was huge for taking pressure off Cameron Dukes and for closing out this game.
Yeah, Carey's been superb. He is so different than what they had last year with AJ. But he just finds paths when it looks like there's nothing there. His shiftiness and his strength have really impressed me. He just has been everything you could possibly have wanted. The run blocking is fantastic for sure, but his ability to jump cut and to get small and to get through holes and to hit holes hard and get his pad level down. He's been a superb running back.
I really like how Coach Dinwiddie used all three of Carey, Adeboboye, and McMahon. First of all, they're getting Carey rest, which I think is key because he's had a lot of carries in the first 5 games of the season. And, 16, it could have been much higher, but they got Adeboboye in earlier. Instead of putting him in the fourth, which they've done previously, they got him rotating early on. I actually thought, I was worried that there was an injury to Kadeem Carey that I had missed, but it was just, I think that Dinwiddie wanted to cycle through his guys. But why that's an advantage offensively is they've all got different styles. So Kadeem Carey is sort of a multi-purpose back. Adeboboye is a pounder, and McMahon's a sort of scat back who can make a guy miss. What I like about how Dinwiddie employs them is that it's not necessarily to their strength, and that catches defenses off guard. And so on McMahon's touchdown, it was first and goal from the 5. McMahon's in there. You're not thinking power run. You're thinking, well, this is a pass play. They're going to try and isolate McMahon one-on-one with a linebacker or something like that. They're going to run a draw play. No, they just handed the ball to McMahon and power right up the field, and Montreal wasn't looking for it. And they did that a few times tonight where they started with double tight, motion guys out wide, and you're now thinking, oh, it's a pass. And no, they run right up the gut. So I do like how they've got defenses second guessing and unable to really rely on any kind of tendency.
I don't know if it was true or not, but it felt like I caught a side eye from Adeboboye after one play where it felt like maybe he wondered why Dukes didn't keep since the end was crashing so hard, and Dukes, gave him the ball and sort of gave it to Adeboboye and into the waterfall of guys that were crashing down. But I thought Adeboboye played really well.
Yeah, he played a great game. I'm still waiting for Dukes to pull one of these. That's what I'm waiting for because
I think that was the look on Adeboboye's face from where I was sitting.
Yeah, I think he's like, why didn't you pull that one? Because it's there. And like no one, this has been for 3 straight games now where when they run, especially when they run those like what appear to be read options, we don't know for sure if there's an actual read going on there or if it's a pre-planned handoff, but they appear to be read options. They're playing it like it. And it's there for Dukes to pull and run. But I think you don't want to put Dukes in harm's way. Like you can't run the Georgia Tech offense in the CFL with a quarterback that you're hoping to hang on to all season long. So
yeah, because if you get it wrong,
when you get plowed into the ground,
the problem, right? Like I get as a quarterback how you're like, well, no, not that time.
It's also really hard to do. Like just at full speed, it's one of the hardest things you ever do in football. Anyone that's played quarterback can vouch for this. If you try and run a read option, everything's happening it just feels like light speed when you're trying to make that read. And it's so easy to get it wrong. And when there's nothing worse than the feeling of pulling that ball and the defensive end is still coming right at you. Like you're dead. So it's an easy thing for us up here to say, yeah, you probably should have pulled that. But at one of these days he will, and he's going to run for about 30 yards down that sideline.
Yeah, I thought he did it. I thought Dukes did a good job tonight of playing within himself, and he scrambled for that nice red zone touchdown. So he did get a little more red zone accomplishment. I think that's the kind of game that they were hoping to have in the first half of the season, which is. Dukes basically played within himself. The defense scores a touchdown. Special teams dominates field position, and you try and get away with one. And that was the perfect recipe tonight.
It was not a good fantasy day for Argos wide receivers today. Dukes always spreads the ball around well, but with only 131 yards passing, when you're spreading it around to 8 or 9 different guys, that doesn't generate a lot. And so like the leading receiver for the Argos in receptions is 4, and that's Rasheed Bailey, 4 catches for 28 yards. And the leading yardage getter is Richie Sandani, 2 catches for 36. And one of those came on that 29-yard catch and run. It was just a 5-yard hook, and Sandani turned on the Jets, got around the outside and turned that one into 29. There just wasn't anything downfield. All of the 2 longest plays of the night for the Argos, the longest was that 29-yard run I just talked about. But the second longest was a 17-yard reception by Kadeem Carey, and that was also about a 3 or 4 yard throw. There was just nothing downfield. And if there is an area of concern, we talked about this before, like that's the recipe for stopping Cameron Dukes is bringing everybody up. You got to bring everybody up, press everybody. You can play 2-man if you want to, but you got to bring everybody up and force Dukes to throw over top of you. Now, he burned Edmonton when they did that in week 3. But other than that, we haven't really seen him go much downfield. So I'm sure that's one of the reasons Coach Dinwiddie was upset with his receivers in his postgame press conference. He talked about being upset at receiver discipline. I don't know if that was just running right routes or whatever else, but I think on Cameron Dukes, maybe there are some receivers open downfield that he saw too, where he wanted Dukes to take some chances and maybe some 50-50 balls he could have gone after, or ways he could have pressed downfield a little bit more just to take some of that heat off. And maybe it wasn't so much for tonight, but for next week going into Hamilton, you have to think the Ticats are going to be very aggressive and playing within that box.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell without the All-24 film, but it's only natural for teams to, if you have a quarterback who's not been able to look at you if you're 25 yards down the field, that when you're running your 25-yard route, how crisp is it? How are you running it with intention to catch, or are you running it with the belief that this is not likely to be a pass to me? And I don't know if they were doing that, but I could see, it's hard. I think, in terms of the discipline of being able to run those routes, it is definitely demanding when you're probably not getting a lot of targets.
Other concerns on offense, the 2 missed snaps. One could have been a disaster. That was early in the game. Dukes just barely got his fingertips on it and was able to, he still got sacked on the play, but at least he was able to hold on to the ball. That's one that could have gone sailing 15 yards over his head and turned into a Montreal touchdown. The other one,
those are one of those weird, game-changing plays, right? If that goes over his head and they score a touchdown and the crowd starts to get going, and it's potentially a completely different football game.
Yeah. Yeah, football's so weird like that. Just a couple inches here or there, and you've got a whole different result. And that was early, right? That was the first quarter still, yeah. I think, at that stage. And instead, Dukes is able to make an athletic play. I have no idea how he got his hand on that, because just watching the replay, it didn't look as bad live from overhead.
It went straight up.
Yeah, it just took off on De Castro, and 2 of them in that game, so he's got to clean that up a little bit. There were a couple of procedure penalties. There was the Argos again penalized a lot, 7 penalties for 70 yards. That's still too much. They've got to bring that down. It's been a theme all season long where they've had more penalties than the opposition. Montreal with only 4 penalties for 34 yards, so they do need to clean up that area of the game. Dinwiddie was upset at receiver alignment, guys not being lined up in the right formations, and that throws you off as a quarterback too. If you're not confident that your receivers are going to know what their assignments are or aren't lining up in the right spot, that really affects the concepts you're trying to run. So I wonder if that might have happened late on in that. I think it was the last drive for the Argos. Dukes had play action and then he ended up running it himself. I wonder if that was supposed to maybe be an RPO and the receiver didn't do what he was supposed to be doing or something like that. It just looked weird. You don't usually see a fake handoff and then have the quarterback run behind him. Usually that means something went awry. So we'll have to find out what that was throughout the course of the week. Let's talk about that Toronto Argonauts defense. They were astonishingly good. Wynton McManus with that pick 6, that play was such a high IQ football play. McManus starts on the right side of the formation. He's got what I think on that play, I think he had what's called a green dog, where he's got man coverage on Walter Fletcher there, but if Fletcher stays into block, he's got a green light to blitz. And I think he started that, and then he saw Fletcher start to leak, and he picked up immediately. He's like, I know what this is. This is a screen. And he ends up shooting through the opposite side B gap, picks off the screen pass for a pick 6. That was such a vintage Wynton McManus pick because his interceptions are always high IQ interceptions. That's how I saw that one. And that was just such a momentum changer.
Yeah, he played, he was, again, we knew he would have to play huge. And he brought that energy. He brought that level of aggression. It just didn't feel like Montreal. I don't know whether it was because the Calgary game took so much out of them or the Toronto game hangover, but it just did. Montreal's defense just never had the juice going tonight. And, thankfully McManus and the Toronto guys were able to dial it up intensity wise. It was just, it just didn't feel like Montreal got into any kind of. They played well defensively, but it didn't feel like the normal kind of swarming Montreal defense. Where they were coming at you and they were turning balls over. I guess with the injuries, they just seemed a little flat tonight.
Yeah, they definitely weren't on. I'm sure losing your quarterback too. I'm sure that was deflating. But as I said, it didn't look like they had it even before that. Like I said, they scored one point with Cody Fajardo. This game is definitely different if he's in there for the whole game. I have to believe it ends up closer than it was. But yeah, they just didn't seem to be on tonight. And I think you have to remember this is still a very, very talented Montreal team. They're still the best team in the league in my mind. It's just that they showed tonight that they can be beaten. I think we saw a little glimpse of that last week when Calgary had that 2-touchdown advantage in the third quarter, that there were vulnerabilities there and teams are starting to figure out how to play against this Montreal team. The DBs looked pretty solid after a few games of shaky play from defensive backs. I thought Johnson had a really nice game. I thought Benji Franklin had a nice game. Amani Dennis, as much as I ripped him for that late blitz, I thought played really well in coverage. He was in on that Benji Franklin interception where it looked like Benji Franklin had the trail responsibility and Dennis had over top on that. And that's what baited Evans into that interception throw. So I thought that secondary, for all those moving pieces and new guys in different spots, played extremely well in a pretty tough position where you're playing against a quarterback you didn't necessarily prepare for as much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that from a coaching staff point of view, they're definitely rotating more guys into the mix, which I think is good, and getting a better sense of what guys are good at. Guys are obviously getting a deeper sense of the scheme, and so are able to play faster. And I think exactly that interception is a perfect example of exactly how you run that zone defense, to not just trail but to bait via the trail, and then the overhead coverage was perfect, was right there. If that hadn't been picked, it was not going to be caught. So I thought they played that zone perfect. A couple times. I mean, I'd like to see if they play Montreal to have a few more answers for Philpott, but I thought that it was a pretty good performance from the secondary. Definitely, like a lot more variance in what they were playing, and so teams couldn't just pick on one guy.
And they did hold Philpott in check fairly well, like 4 catches, 38 yards. He had that touchdown on the play that you hated, but that's not a bad job. Like for a receiver who's been torching everybody.
That's true. It's tough. It's tough to do much analysis with Caleb Evans, to be honest.
And then let's give some laurels to Janarion Grant, who was a difference maker in this game. He is such a dangerous returner. I still can't believe the Argos were just able to pick him up, especially as late as they did in the offseason. He's so good at setting up his blocks and at going where you don't expect him to go. There were a couple returns, like his kickoff return touchdown was actually the easiest return he had to make all night. There was nobody there. There was no one in the middle. I feel like there was a missed assignment on Montreal's kickoff team because he just ran straight and it looked almost like he was waiting to find people to like shake or dodge, and there was no one. He just ran in a straight line right up the field. But some of his other returns where there's one return where he's pinned against the left sideline and there's like 1 yard of space to his left, a guy right in front of him, and 64 yards of space to the right. And he goes left, and that guy didn't think in a million years Grant was going to go this way when there's 1 yard there, and he does. He makes the guy miss, turns that into a 17 or 18 yard return. But he will go where you're not expecting him to go. He'll go counter to his blocks. He'll follow his blocks for a period of time and then break one off. And then I thought McMahon had a really nice kick return too. So he shows that with those guys both back there, it's not necessarily going to be easier for you if you kick the hard way and where you can't get as much distance on it and give it to McMahon. He punished Montreal when they did that the one time they tried it. So great game from the special teams.
I watched the game with my dad out here, and he had a few questions as to why Grant was continuing to receive the ball. So I do think that there will be teams that will simply take the which will work out fine, I think, in terms of field position for the Argos. But I do think teams are going to start to look at this and Grant is turning into a game changer. I mean, he is just so fast. You see it like we saw it in practice. You saw it today. He's just so much faster than everybody on the field that if you don't punt it, with your, straight up in the air so your team can be there when he catches it, he's gonna get 25 yards. That's the minimum.
Yeah, he was so dangerous tonight. He was clearly feeling it, but they were blocking that well. And that helps too. Like on that special teams unit, when you've got a guy back there, this is always the case. You look at any great returner throughout the years, going back to Gizmo Williams and Pinball and guys like that. If you're out there on teams and you are blocking for a guy that could take it the distance on any given play, it actually elevates your level of play as well, because you feel accountable. You're like, I better make my block. I don't want to be the reason that my guy doesn't return this for a touchdown. And so it's funny because it's sort of I guess cyclical or a positive thing where having a good returner makes for better blockers and vice versa, because the better blockers generate better returns. And the Argos are in a great place right now where that return team has the confidence every time the ball's kicked to them that this one might go to the house. So it was great to see Janarion Grant capitalize, and McMahon to an extent as well. All right, JB, let's get into our players of the game and our plays of the game. Who is your player of the game in this one?
Well, I can't really be terribly original. I had to go with Janarion Grant. I thought that he was unstoppable, scored a touchdown, gave them incredible field position. Montreal is a field position team. That's how they've been so successful this year, is that they've been able to kind of flip fields, and then teams aren't able to tune out. Teams aren't able to get a drive going. And then Montreal starts with terrific field position, and he just prevented that from happening. If you get the 50, you go 2 and out, that's fine. Now, you punt, and now Montreal is pinned deeper in their own zone. So I thought Janarion Grant was the player who had the most to do with tonight's win.
His stats are unbelievable. So he had 5 punt returns for 97 yards. That's almost 20 yards a punt return. Which is, it's just silly. And then his kickoff returns 72.5 yard average on his kick returns. So that's a pretty good night with a touchdown thrown in there to boot. So
I thought, well, my dad had some questions about the game plan.
We should have, you're out in the East Coast with visiting the family. We should have had your dad on as a special guest. I'm sure he would have been in quite the mood to talk about his Alouettes and their struggles tonight.
No, he was fine to let us do our thing.
I think my player of the game, this is very JB style, because this is kind of off board a little bit. But I'm going to go with Cameron Dukes. He did not light it up by any means. 16 of 20 for 131 and a touchdown. That is that's a stat line you look at and be like, well, that guy barely played. The reason I'm going with Cameron Dukes is there was so much pressure on him this week, because his touchdown to interception ratio have directly impacted every game so far this year. In the first 2 games, he had 2 wins, and in that 2 wins, he had 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. In the 2 games that followed, he had 0 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and those turned into 2 losses. And he had to come into today against the best team in the league in their stadium, a place where everybody struggles to play, and he knew it was on him, where if he turned the ball over, the odds were the Argos were going to lose. And he played smart football from the word go. He pulled the ball down a few times where I know, maybe there were some opportunities, maybe there was some stuff downfield that he didn't take advantage of, but I thought he did everything he needs to do. Right now, this team is good enough where they don't need their quarterback to go out there and be a game changer. They've got game changers. There's game changers on special teams. There's game changers on defense. They've got game changers on offense and Kadeem Carey and in that receiving core. They don't need Cameron Dukes to go out there and throw for 400 yards. What they need him to do is make smart decisions and be a leader out there. And I think that that's what he was tonight. He kept the ball out of harm's way. There was never a single pass where I was like, oh my goodness, is that going to be an interception? He was really smart with the football. And he took advantage of Montreal when they pressured, and he was able to escape the pocket. His touchdown pass was a really heads-up play where he had to avoid an untouched blitzer. He ended up juking left, coming back right, and then escaping left to avoid that blitz. He just looked so comfortable in the pocket tonight, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. We were rough on him, and rightly so last week. He had a terrible game against Saskatchewan, and he was one of the number one reasons they lost that game. I think his control and his discipline and his intelligent football play tonight is one of the main reasons the Argos won this game tonight. Where's your play of the game? What are you doing with this one?
For me, I thought the play of the game was McManus's interception. I thought that took all the air out of the balloon. It was just a brutal, it was a fantastic read, but just such a brutal play, when you are standing basically on your own goal line. The stadium just felt like, that sense of we don't have Fajardo and this is not a game we're going to win. And I'm sure that was a feeling shared by a number of players on Montreal. So I thought that was more than just a touchdown. It was such a dagger play so early to kind of take away that vibe of here's a guy who's coming in and he's going to kind of catch Toronto by surprise. It put an end to any worries about that.
That is the correct play of the game, and that was going to be my play of the game. Mike Hogan made me reveal my play of the game for the Postgame Reaction podcast on our broadcast, so I have to come clean and say that yes, that was also going to be mine. But I'll come up with a backup plan for my play of the game, because I think it's a close second, which was the Janarion Grant kickoff return touchdown. The reason that was massive, it's not that anytime you get a special teams touchdown, that is a huge swing, but Montreal had just scored with less than a minute left in the first half, and they closed the gap to 2 points. Remember, they had that chance for the 2-point conversion. It didn't go, ends up being a 17-15 Toronto lead. 51 seconds left. You think, okay, Montreal's like thinking to themselves, we're going to the half. We're just down 2. Caleb Evans is playing well. He's just led 2 touchdown drives back to back. We've got this game. And then Janarion Grant's like, no, you do not have this game. And he takes that 103 yards and really puts an end to Montreal's hopes. That was it. Once it was 23-15, it never felt like the result was going to be in doubt after that. The Argos were able to game plan for the second half. They now had a lead to sit on that took the pressure off the offense, and they were able to they basically had their way with Montreal's defense in that second half. So
that was clearly a turning point.
The nice thing now for the Argonauts is the blessing of the Thursday game is that they now have a long lead up to the game in Hamilton next Saturday night at 7:00, because this usually is a disadvantage. We've seen a couple games now where the Argos have been playing somebody coming off a bye. That was the case in Saskatchewan last week. They're playing Saskatchewan coming off a bye. They do it many times this season. And this is another one. Hamilton's coming off a bye this week. They host the Argos next Saturday night at Tim Hortons Field. But the Argos actually have a little bit of an edge here because it's just Thursday. They're going to get home tonight. They'll get home late. They'll sleep in their own beds. They wake up tomorrow. It's an off day. They got another off day. And they actually got a full week of practice. And so while Hamilton may get a one-day edge on them after they return from their bye week, it's not the same head start as if you are playing on a short week, on a 6-day, on a 5-day week, heading in to play a team on the road where you have to, fly and whatever else. They're taking a bus. It's an easy road trip, and they've got a full week to prep for a Ticats team that is struggling, looking for answers, and desperate for a win. So that is going to be a good one. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction podcast episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Again, the final score from Percival Molson Stadium is the Toronto Argonauts 37, the Montreal Alouettes 18. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.